Welcome to Health Club with Julia. I'm your host, health coach, and registered dietitian, Julia Campagna. I'm on a mission to bridge the gap between looking your best and living your life to the fullest. After years of over dieting, struggling with disordered eating, and destroying my social life, I finally found how to reach my dream physique without sacrificing the things I love. Now I'm sharing all my strategies and education with you. We'll be talking all things health, including hormones, metabolism, and lifestyle to help you cut out the confusion and start living. So get cozy and join the club. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Health Club with Julia podcast. As always, I am so happy you are here. Today's conversation is a good one for anyone who does not want to have kids in the near future. I honestly love talking, and I'm sure you guys know this by now if you're avid listeners, but I love talking about birth control, coming off of birth control, preventing pregnancy, like natural methods of birth control, all things dealing with birth control and female hormones. That's like my favorite things to talk about. And I want to dive in a little bit more on specifics on how to prevent pregnancy if that is your goal. Now, one of the, I would say, biggest barriers for people who want to come off birth control but are afraid to come off birth control is obviously preventing pregnancy. Now, not everybody goes on birth control for the idea of pregnancy prevention. Some people go on it to help heal acne, some go on it to help balance their periods, which it does not do. Little side note there, but some people do it for more of period PMS related issues that they are having, and some people go on it for preventing a pregnancy. And then when you're on it for a few years, odds are eventually you will want to come off of it. Now, I've talked to many women who say, I do want to come off of it. I've been on it for a long time, but I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm scared. And they have these feelings, and those feelings are valid. I totally understand that feeling. I was in this place myself where, I knew it was time to get off of it, but my goal was not to have kids at the time that I got off of it. That's not what I wanted. Yes, do I want kids in the future? Absolutely. But I, at the time, was not ready for that. And so it is a worry. It is something that can make people second guess themselves and stay on birth control longer just because they're afraid of, the chance of getting pregnant when they are not ready for that. And again, these feelings are totally valid. I totally understand why people feel this way. So I want this episode to be, one, reassuring, right? I want you to understand that there are ways that you can go about this without having to worry about that, or not be as worried as you are currently if you're thinking about coming off birth control. And I also want this to be educational. So I want you to take things from this episode that you can use for yourself if your goal is to come off birth control and if you do want to prevent pregnancy. If those are your two goals, I want this to be educational. There's things that I will talk about in here that you can actively start doing to naturally prevent pregnancy. And that is today's topic, is how to, or what are the natural strategies that you can use to prevent pregnancy. And I'm highlighting the word natural because birth control is not natural, obviously. You're getting pumped with hormones. So what are some natural strategies if you do want to come off of it but you don't want kids, at least yet? And it's funny, when I was thinking about this episode and thinking about what to write, I immediately thought of the Mean Girls quote. So if you've seen Mean Girls, if you are one of those people who love Mean Girls, you know what I will be talking about. It's the scene where they're in such sex education, and the coach or professor or whoever it is says, don't have sex because you will get pregnant and die. That's what I thought of when I was when I was creating this episode and kind of thinking about what I wanted to talk about. Immediately popped into my brain this scene. And although we all know that that's a joke, if you have sex, chances are you will not get pregnant and you will not die, you're fine. That is an exaggeration in the movie, but it's really funny because, again, going back to how people feel coming off of birth control, is this really scary thing that they think of, maybe they are sexually active, and that's not the worry, but the worry is getting pregnant and having something bad happen. So no, this is not Mean Girls. No, you can have sex. You will not get pregnant if you follow these methods correctly, and you should be fine. So I first want to clarify the fertile window, because a lot of people think that if you get off birth control, if you are having sex on a daily basis, you can get pregnant any day of the month. And that is not true necessarily. So I do want to highlight your fertile window and give you a little bit more education on when can you actually get pregnant during the month. So, funny enough, you can only really get pregnant 6 days out of the month. 6. There's roughly 30 days in a month, give or take, and you can only get pregnant really on about 6 of those days. So if you're worried about, I can get pregnant any single day of the month, that's not necessarily true. Now, you do need to know what your fertile window is to accurately know when those 6 days that you can get pregnant, you do need to know what that is, but you really can only get pregnant for 6 days out of the month. And, that's why sometimes people struggle to get pregnant, because they might be having sex every single day to get pregnant, but they're not able to because of their menstrual cycle. And so you have your highest probability of getting pregnant on your ovulation day. And then from there, it will decrease. So your chances of getting pregnant decrease going away from ovulation. So leading up to ovulation, yes, there's some chances. Ovulation day is your highest probability. And then after your ovulation day, your chances go down daily. You're more likely to conceive before ovulation, though, than after, hence why your chances decrease after ovulation. So when you are tracking your cycle, and I'm going to be talking about this more in this episode, but when you are tracking your cycle, you will have a good idea of when your ovulation day is. And the days leading up to that, plus I would say like 1 or 2 days after ovulation, is your quote-unquote fertile window. So this includes your ovulation day, so the actual day that you ovulate, like I said, 1 to 2 days after ovulation and a few days before. So I would say anywhere from like 3 days before you're at higher risk. So like 3 days before ovulation day, and then 1 to 2 days after. And then again, the chances go down each day after ovulation. But that is your fertile window. So in order to understand what your specific fertile window is for you, you need to be tracking your cycle to know where you are in your menstrual cycle so that you know where your fertile window is. So that's a little side note. You technically cannot get pregnant any single day of the month. It's really only in your fertile window, which helps and hopefully reassures you that your chances are less than you probably think that they are. Now, again, you should still be careful. You should still, use certain methods to prevent it if your goal is to prevent pregnancy, but just reassuring you that it's not going to be like an every single day thing. And there's times that you're more likely to and times that you are less likely to. So let's go over some of the non-hormonal ways to prevent pregnancy, right? So obviously we know hormonal ways, birth control, there's other methods. There's the rod that's put in you. There's IUDs, the pill, a shot. There's a lot of different methods of hormonal birth control, but I obviously, with this topic being natural strategies to prevent pregnancy, want to talk about the non-hormonal ways to prevent pregnancy. So we'll start off with the copper IUD. So this is an intrauterine device. This is similar to the hormonal IUDs. However, this is non-hormonal. So the only non-hormonal IUD out there is the copper IUD. The way that this works is that the copper creates a kind of non-ideal environment for sperm. So you might think, okay, so I have this copper IUD. How is this a form of pregnancy prevention? It's non-hormonal, so you might be thinking chances are higher. And well, I don't know the actual statistics of copper IUD versus the hormonal IUDs. Hormonal IUDs, just off the bat, just like thinking about it, would probably have a higher guarantee of not getting pregnant. But this one still does prevent pregnancy because it creates this non-ideal environment for the sperm, so they can't necessarily live and thrive and go through the whole process as they normally would without it. So again, the way that it works, copper ions, so copper from the copper IUD, these ions are toxic to sperm and ovum, and they can impair motility of your sperm, or the male sperm. So as you know, if sperm enters these ions from the copper, slow motility, impair the motility of the sperm, so they can't travel as far as well, and basically they are set up for failure, right? When you think about pregnancy in general, it's really a race to the egg, and whatever sperm is, it's like survival of the fittest really with sperm, and whatever one makes it there first and can actually make the entire trek, because a lot of sperm die off before even reaching the egg. But if that sperm reaches the egg in time, then it's the lucky winner, it can fertilize the egg. But with this non-ideal environment created by the copper, the motility is impaired and it's a lot less likely to be able to travel to the egg. So I would still, even though the copper IUD is non-hormonal, there's no hormones being added to your body to suppress your natural hormonal shifts, I would still support the body with supplements like I would suggest for anyone on hormonal contraceptives. So again, it's non-hormonal, but it can have effects on your body. So I would still support it as if you were taking hormonal birth control. So with this, I would suggest, again, this is going to vary person to person, but my general recommendations for the general population would be a multivitamin, high-level multivitamin, a fish oil with good quality ratio of EPA, DHA, a vitamin B complex, vitamin D support, and magnesium. Those are always my kind of staples for general population. And I would still use these supplements if you are on or have the IUD, the copper IUD, even though it's non-hormonal. Still support your body to ensure you are staying relatively as healthy as you can with this kind of birth control that you are using. So that's number one. Second option for non-hormonal birth control, pregnancy prevention, is one of the more obvious ones, condoms. So this is a barrier method. This is exactly how it sounds, a barrier method. It is a barrier for sperm to enter and therefore lessening your risk and chance of getting pregnant. So the thing with condoms, pros, they're easily accessible, they are fairly cheap. You can use them very easily. They do not take any sort of equipment or really thought process to them. They're very easy to use, very accessible, very convenient to have. Cons, can make the feel of pleasure a little bit different. They might not be as comfortable. So really, there's not a ton of cons to this. It just depends on your preference and if you want that or not. But this is a very good tool to use if you do want to prevent pregnancy and you are open to using the barrier method. There's not much more that I have to say about this. This one's pretty straightforward. You probably have all learned about this in your sex education classes. I know we don't learn a lot about female health, but we did learn about condoms in health class in middle school and high school. At least I did. So I'm sure you have a good kind of variety in education on condoms. But that is option number 2, the barrier method with condoms. Option number 3 is what's called the family planning method. So this is where you really need to understand your menstrual cycle to locate what your fertile window is. So if you are going to use family planning method, you need to use a couple of different things that I will talk about to track your menstrual cycle, learn more about your menstrual cycle, learn about how long your fertile window is, how long your follicular phase is, your ovulatory phase, your luteal phase, menstrual phase. Like, learn as much as you can about your menstrual cycle, basically, because you need to know what your fertile window is to use this option. Now, in order to have this work even better, there's things that we can do. One is to abstain from intercourse during your fertile window. And again, you need to know what your fertile window is for this to work, but you can simply abstain from intercourse during that time. So just say no during that time when you're entering your fertile window and a couple days after ovulation. So within that fertile window, once you know what that is, best option is to abstain from intercourse. During that time, your chances of getting pregnant then are relatively zero if you are not having intercourse during your fertile window. So this is a very, very effective option if you're going to abstain. Or you can also use a berry method during this time to double your chances of not getting pregnant or preventing pregnancy. So if you are tracking your fertile window, you can also use a barrier method during your fertile window to make sure that you are extra careful with preventing pregnancy. So those are two things that you can do on top of the family planning method to ensure that you are doing the best you can to prevent the pregnancy. The one kind of, I guess it's a con, but it's also kind of a pro, because learning about your body is a pro. It's good to learn about your body, but one con that makes this harder is that it does require you to learn and understand your body. That's going to take some time. So it's not just like a one-time deal. You need to really track your cycle over the course of, I would say, at least 3 cycles to really understand how long each phase of your cycle is, understand what signs you feel when you're entering your fertile window. Also, if you're using an app, give it at least 3 cycles for the app to understand when your fertile window is. So it does require time and education and understanding about your body. So this one isn't for everyone. It is very effective. It does work very well if you take the time to learn about your body and understand where you're at in your cycle and learn what your fertile window is. If you can do that, this method, this option, is a really, really great one to use. This is honestly what I use. I love this. I have, gone a decent amount of time now without hormonal birth control, and everything seems to be okay, knock on wood. But it is an effective method if you are doing it correctly and take the time to understand your body. So that is the only kind of con, but again, flip side to that, it is a pro because you're learning about your body. You are learning if your periods are regular, what PMS symptoms you have, how long your phases are of your cycle, length of time of the entire cycle, not even just the phases. Like, you're learning a lot about you and your body, which is not a bad thing. It just, in terms of preventing pregnancy, can take some time and patience to learn that skill. So that is another method, the family planning method. Within that, there's things that you can do on top of family planning. Like I said, abstain from intercourse during your fertile window or use a barrier method during your fertile window. And this will ensure that your chances of getting pregnant are very minimal. Now, there's other things, again, that you can do within this family planning method to help you understand more about your body, your menstrual cycle, and when your fertile window is. And so I'm going to go over 3 different things that I would have any of my clients or anybody that is coming to me for questions. These are 3 methods that I would suggest you do use to learn about your menstrual cycle, your body, when your fertile window is. So if you are watching this on YouTube, I do have these things in front of me, so you'll be able to actually see them. But I will do the best I can at explaining them via words for anybody not watching this video and they're just watching or listening to the podcast. But first things first is your BBT tracking. Your BBT is your basal body temperature, and you can track this. So what this does is it tracks the variability in your body temperature at rest, key at rest, and I'll explain that. And this helps to locate your fertile window. So you want to do this, like I said, the key is at rest. You want to do this first thing in the morning before you move, before you get out of bed, before you talk to somebody who's maybe laying next to you, before you go on your phone. Like, try to do this first thing. The more that you move around, the more that you are awake and up and, active, even if you're not out of bed, but you're actively awake and moving around, your body temperature is going to change. So we want it to be at rest as much as possible. So what I do is I have this thermometer, which again, if you're watching this video, you can see I have my thermometer here. I put this thermometer on my nightstand. It's the first thing I do is roll over when I wake up, grab my thermometer, take my temperature, and sync it to the app that I use. So all you need is a thermometer. If you have an Oura ring, the app that I use is called Natural Cycles, and that is kind of what tracks my cycle for me, so I can kind of see where I'm at in the cycle. If you have an Oura ring, they do pair with Natural Cycles, so you do not need a thermometer. If you have an Oura ring, the Oura ring will take your temperature and sync it to the app. So that's a really good feature of the Oura ring. I do not have the Oura ring. I'm thinking about getting the Oura ring, so if anybody listening to this has an Oura ring and who have really good reviews or thoughts or anything on the Oura ring, send them in, because I'm really debating getting it. But you can use the Oura ring for your temperature. If you don't have an Oura ring, just grab a thermometer. I use the one that connects with the app. That way I don't manually put it in. I just take my temperature and then via Bluetooth, it syncs with the app. But you can use any regular thermometer. It does not have to be the thermometer that syncs with the app. But you will need a thermometer of some sort to take your temperature. So you'll take your temperature at rest, and then you'll put it into the app, or you can old school if you don't want to use the app, you can write it down, but I would track it somewhere. And the changes in variability will tell you where you're at in your cycle. So for normal everyday occurrence, not ovulation, not during your fertile window, the average temperature for us is anywhere from like 95 to 97.5 degrees. That is our kind of average temperature before ovulation, right? So your follicular phase, you're in this regular temperature. Now, when you get closer to your fertile window and when you do ovulate, that temperature rises. And so when we see the rise in temperature, that is telling us, okay, we are around our ovulation, we are in our fertile window. The cool thing is that temperature will stay slightly elevated after ovulation until you bleed. So again, you will know when you ovulate based on the variability with your temperature. And it's nothing crazy. Like, don't think it's gonna go from, if your average temperature is like 97, don't think it's gonna go to like 101. No, you'd be having a fever, you'd be sick as a dog. So it's not that much, but it does jump up into like higher 97, 98. I think my average when it does spike is like 98.1, something around there. So it's definitely up a degree, but it's nothing crazy. It's not like sick levels. It's just more than your average before ovulation. So that is one way you can find your fertile window, is by tracking your temperature and looking for changes in variability. So that is part one of figuring out where your fertile window is. Now, part two of figuring out where your fertile window is by using what's called LH test strips. So LH is our luteinizing hormone. This hormone is pretty low, relatively low, until ovulation. When you are entering ovulation, that is when you see a surge or a spike in your LH hormone, your luteinizing hormone. It surges and peaks within 24 hours of ovulation. And so for those, again, who are watching this and not just listening to it, I will they just look like little test strips. Honestly, if you have a partner, tell them about this, because it kind of looks like a pregnancy test. Like, it's not one of those plastic, big, long pregnancy tests that you typically see. It's just a pee strip. So you just urinate on it. So it's just a test strip, but it does have lines that show up, and so if your partner is unaware of what you are testing for, they could look at you like, what the heck are you testing for? And if it has double lines, they could think you are pregnant. So just forewarning, I had to do this with my fiance, and he was like, what is that? I was like, don't worry, it's not a pregnancy test, it's an LH test. So just side note on that, give them a little heads up if you're going to use it. But this is what it looks like, again, if you are watching it live. Well, it's in its package. This is unopened, but it's just a little package, and in it is just a very small, thin urine strip. And all you will do is urinate on this, and it will show you a positive or a negative reading. The good thing about tracking your cycle via an app, especially I know Natural Cycles, because that's the one that I use, it will tell you when to test your LH, so you don't have to use a strip every single day. When it gives you feedback, positive or negative, it will tell you if you're ovulating or not. So again, your LH, what it's testing for is your luteinizing hormone to see if it's having a positive reading. If you have a positive reading for your LH test strip, odds are you are ovulating. You are in your fertile window, you are ovulating. If it is showing negative, odds are you are not in your fertile window. I will say, however, that typically when I do test, I do generally have one positive. So one day it will be positive, and I test like 3 days in a row. So usually what happens is the first day that I test via what the app tells me, it's negative. The second day I test is usually positive, and the third day is negative again. However, keep in mind those first and third tests, even though they're negative, if I'm ovulating on that second day, I am still considered in my fertile window during those negative tests, the day before, the day after my positive. So just be careful with that as well. But typically when you do get that positive reading, you're within 24 hours. So that doesn't mean that you are ovulating right when that is positive. That could mean you're ovulating the next day. So it's within 24 hours. However, when that does show positive, you are in your fertile window. You do need to take extra caution with intercourse. So that is method number 2 to figure out what your fertile window is. The third thing that you can use to figure out where your fertile window is and when you're in that fertile window is your cervical mucus. Now this might be a little weird, it might gross you out, but we have cervical mucus for a reason. And you might have never thought about it. You might have always thought like, why do I have this? What's going on? But there is a reason for that. And the cool thing is that it does actually change in quality and quantity through your menstrual cycle. So during ovulation, your cervical mucus becomes more abundant. I don't know if you've ever experienced this before, but you have a lot more cervical mucus during your ovulatory window, during your fertile window. It also gets a little bit stickier, it's a little bit more clear. So during your follicular phase, it's usually a little bit more cloudy, and during ovulation, it's a little bit more clear. So this one is a little bit harder, I think, to learn, so do some research on this one, but it can be a really effective tool on showing you when your fertile window is. If you are having more abundance of it, if it's sticky, if it's clear, odds are you're probably during, right around your ovulation time, and you need to be a little bit more careful. But this does, when you find that your cervical mucus is a bit more abundant, clear, sticky, when that starts to happen, that is a sign that's signaling that you are entering your fertile window. And you will experience that kind of cervical mucus until you enter your luteal phase, where as you go through your luteal phase, it actually dries out a bit more, it's less abundant, you don't have as much, sometimes you don't have anything at all until you bleed. But that time where it's a bit more abundant, stickier, clearer, signaling that you are in your ovulatory phase and getting into your fertile window, so be careful with that. This basically, if you want to think about it, right, if you want to think about why we have this, why we have changes in our cervical mucus, during our ovulatory phase, right, our fertile window, us as human species, we are meant to reproduce. So our bodies are programmed to help us reproduce. And so when you have more abundant cervical mucus, think of it as like a natural lubricant. That is the time that if your goal is to reproduce, you're gonna have sex more then. You're gonna feel, this is also why, if you think about PMS symptoms and how you feel during your cycle, that's why during your ovulatory phase.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Health Club with Julia podcast. If you love the episode, share the podcast and tag me, and subscribe so you don't miss any further episodes. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a DM. Thanks for being a part of the club. See you next time.